Thanks everyone for joining. Good morning, good afternoon. I think an exciting day. It's a topic that I need to learn a lot more on. But before we get into it, by the way, my name is Michel. I'm here with my friends Matt and Jimmy, who know more about all this stuff than I do. This is the November Learning Hour. This session will be posted in its entirely on the YouTube channel. I'll post a link in the comments in a second, but you can find the learning hours from the past 2 months there as well. There will not be a learning hour in December. If you go all the way to the top of today's chat, there is a bootcamp that's going to take place. It's a 3-day Converge Comms bootcamp. I just pinned the link to the chat. 3-day Converge Comms bootcamp. Day 1 is all about Teams rooms. Day 2 is all about phone. Day 3 is all about Copilot and premium experiences. And like Matt said, there's a lot of stuff coming out at Ignite. So during the bootcamp, we can talk, and by the way, it's a sales bootcamp. We can talk about a lot of the good stuff that's been announced and how partners can make money off of that and customers can make the most out of that solution as well. Jimmy, Matt, what's best? Native, CVI?
Let's first start say and introduce people and say, Matt, I think when we were making this deck and we were going through it, this is a complicated topic that has challenges even when we're presenting to customers and we're discussing things. And you see the first slide that's on there. What's right for my conference room when joining Teams meetings? Now, this might, in your head, sort of say, all right, we're going to talk about CVI, and we're going to talk about direct guest join. But Matt, I think we got to frame exactly the standpoint that we're going to talk about today and how we're going to frame this conversation.
Agreed. Yeah, I think this was a fun conversation, even just as you and I were talking about this, of how do we want to frame this conversation? How do we, help folks understand what message we're trying to land here? And this is really what are the best solutions to make it into a Teams meeting? Is it direct guest join? Is it CVI? Is it a Teams room? Is it using your laptop and just dropping it in the middle of a conference room table and calling it good? There are many different ways to join a Teams meeting from a physical room. What does that look like, and kind of what are the right solutions for that? And I think this conversation that you and I will have today will help kind of land that message with folks. But that's kind of our overarching intent here, is just what's the easiest and what's the right way for your business, for your customer, for your partner to make it into a Teams meeting.
Yeah, and we're going to talk about direct guest join, obviously, CVI and other technologies that we have. But Michelle, if we go to the next slide, we'll jump into the conversation and sort of frame everything that we want to talk about. So when we talk about joining a Teams meeting, we really do have, Matt, the Teams room system. We have direct guest joins. For instance, if you are on a Zoom room and you want to join a Teams meeting, they use direct guest join to join the Teams meeting. There's also Cloud Video Interop. So you can get into Teams meetings a number of different ways. That's really what we're here to talk about, is getting into that Teams meeting. Now, I want to frame it, Matt, and we're going to talk about it. If your customer, or you are an enterprise and everything else, and you primarily use Zoom for your meeting platform, then I don't think we have a choice. We want you to use Zoom rooms. That is the best way that you will actually join the minority of your meetings, which are Teams meetings. We want everybody who's a Teams customer to know that the best way to join a meeting is a Microsoft Teams room. But for those that need to get into this and everything else, and we don't want to argue, am I a primary Teams house? Am I a primary Zoom house? That's something that a customer has to decide on their own. And Matt, we know, talking to some customers, they haven't even gotten to that step yet.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, there are customers that I talk to day in and day out that haven't decided what their primary UC platform is and let everybody pick. And those customers kind of live in a mixed state no matter what. Where a lot of other customers, they've decided on one platform as their primary platform for their meetings. And I've walked into conversations with customers where their primary platform is Zoom, and I've left the conversation going, really, you should probably use Zoom rooms. If 99% of your meetings in your organization are Zoom, a Zoom room makes a whole lot of sense. And in the same direction, if 99% of your meetings are Teams, a Teams room makes a lot of sense. But we understand that customers are going to have an interop scenario no matter what, because even if 99% of your organization's meetings or 100% of your organization's meetings are Teams, someone that you work with, do business with, communicate with, those are all going to be on some other platform. Maybe they're WebEx, maybe they're Zoom, maybe they're Amazon Chime, who knows what that platform might be, because you work with a bunch of different customers, partners, etc., from business to business scenarios, and you need to make sure that you can join those as well. That's where these interop scenarios come into play. And the one thing I do want to call out is Direct Guest Join is the WebRTC based experience that you can join meetings with. That one's available across Zoom rooms and Cisco rooms today, as well as Teams rooms. There are movements towards this SIP Interop service and using the CVI capabilities that we'll mention. So if you're running a Zoom room that also has the SIP Interop capability enabled on it to join meetings via SIP instead of using WebRTC, the capabilities that you're going to experience joining a Teams meeting with that are going to fall into the CVI bucket. So for the sake of our conversation today, there are really only 3 scenarios here. There is Teams rooms, there is Direct Guest Join, and there's CVI. That CVI experience may happen on a Zoom room though. So just an important thing to keep in mind is depending on how your device is configured, if it's joining via web, it's going to use Direct Guest Join. If that device is joining via SIP, it's going to use CVI. That could be a Zoom room, that could be a Cisco codec, and Jimmy and I were joking yesterday, that could be a Tamberg device for all we care. It can still make it into the meeting one way or the other. So that's kind of the categories that these things fall into.
And let's jump to the next slide. So let's jump into Direct Guest Join. I see there's a couple questions and everything else, and we're going to get to everything that's in there, from troubleshooting to somebody actually mentioned a BYOD device and everything else. Personally, I know that BYOD is a solution that many are out there using, but I think some of the things you'll see at Ignite and other places, you're going to want a Teams room system. And that's why the path is really, all right, if I've got BYOD now, let's make sure that you're using a Teams certified device so that you can get to MTR very easily in the future. But Direct Guest Join, Matt, Direct Guest Join, like you said, it is a WebRTC experience. And I know people want to harp on what is this and everything like that. And I think even the question that's in there, what's the best option to troubleshoot Direct Guest Join? Since it is a browser-based experience, one of the ways that I actually troubleshoot is from a browser itself. You join the service from a browser. So if you're joining a Teams meeting, if you're on a Zoom room and you're joining a Teams meeting and there's a problem with that, join on the browser of a system. Can you reproduce that from the browser of the Windows device? Now, if that happens, we know where it actually lives. It lives in whoever service that is on the website. Now, that doesn't mean that, hey, I'm just going to open up a ticket on that side. Both the room system that you have inside of the room and the platform that it's on, we engineer that together. So Zoom and Microsoft engineers come together and we actually work out these problems. So that's kind of where a troubleshooting answer would be. But Direct Guest Join, Matt, like I said, it's WebRTC, but I don't want to get stuck on that. This is a great solution because, again, this is not your primary meeting platform. We don't expect that you're going to have a majority of your meetings on here. Now, you may have a significant number of meetings on here, but again, you're joining the conference using the technology that's inside of the room with that single touch click.
Exactly. And I mean, WebRTC was built as the web solution for each of the meeting platforms. So the whole mindset was, oh, a user today who is just using their laptop to join a Teams meeting, Zoom meeting, WebEx meeting, Google Meet meeting, etc., if they don't have the native client installed on their laptop, they can join from a web browser. So the whole thought process for room systems was to build that same solution. So that same anonymous meeting join experience, it's not an authenticated meeting join. It's quite literally opening, for a Zoom room joining a Teams meeting, for instance, it's opening teams.microsoft.com and autofilling the name field here with the room's name and joining into the meeting as an anonymous participant into that meeting. We do the same thing in the opposite direction for the other third parties. But then it's built towards a non-interactive experience for that room in order to get that room system into the meeting. It's a $0, easy to use solution that can span across a plethora of devices without having to build custom UIs and custom capabilities for each of the different things. So that's where WebRTC stands in this spot here. But the reality is, and to your point, Jimmy, from a troubleshooting perspective, opening a web browser on that device, if that device has an exposable web browser, and trying to get to that is really key to it. And I saw a comment in the chat about what does direct internet access mean for WebRTC direct guest join experiences. It means that that endpoint needs to be able to get to those URLs. So if you've got an organization that's locked down your security and said, hey, these devices are on a segmented VLAN and they can only get to, let's say it's a Teams room, it can only get to Teams endpoints. If you try to join a Zoom meeting and it can't get to zoom.com, WebRTC isn't going to work. So that's the direct internet access caveat here of it's making an open web browser experience to that third-party endpoint. So you need to make sure that that stuff is there.
Yeah, and if we go to the next slide, Michelle, we'll talk a little bit. Yeah. Why is this a great solution? Now you get that one-touch join. Again, this is we're going to show you pluses and minuses of every single one. We're not hiding behind this. We want to have that open conversation because again, this session is to educate all of us on a very difficult conversation to have because the what ifs always come into play. But this is a great solution because you do get that one-touch join solution when you forward the meeting, and there is a Q&A. Should I have an outside person forward the meeting to the room? It doesn't matter. If you want an outside person to have access to schedule your room, that's up to you. I would suggest against that and allow some sort of internal filter to allow the invitations only to come from your domain itself. But again, you can do these things, but there are things that you have to set up. And we've got a whole bunch of Learn articles about third-party join options, including you've got to run some PowerShell commands. Or if you have a pro license and you don't like PowerShell, like me, I'm very not into, hey, I got to open a PowerShell connected and do all these things. With the Pro Portal, you can actually set all recommended things, including allowing direct guest join and third-party invitations in. Now, Matt, what are the trade-offs that we get inside of here? Because we're not giving you everything in a browser experience because some of these things don't actually exist.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, some of these capabilities just don't exist today. I'll pick on dual screen because that seems to be everyone's favorite one to complain about on direct guest join. And frankly, doing dual screen just isn't something that's in the web stack on a device. Your web browser doesn't have a concept of multiple screens. You can have multiple browser windows, but keeping them in sync is really, really hard. So then do you just take that one screen and stretch it across the two different screens? What happens when you have different resolutions with different endpoints? I mean, the scalability challenges that we run into there increase all the time. Similar thing from an HDMI ingest perspective. We don't support HDMI ingest today. We had it working about 50% of the time, which didn't really hit the quality bar. So then it got scrapped for the moment while we focused on other things. I mean, there's a series of different conversations that happen here, but from a reliability standpoint, we want direct guest join to work. And so when we add in these other more complex scenarios and we add in edge cases to things where things just don't work correctly across a series of different devices, it doesn't always make sense.
Yeah, and I see inside of the questions, can I still share content inside of a direct guest join meeting? You can. And one of the ways that we actually train partners and other people to do, sometimes people don't like to see cables, Matt, on the table itself. So they'll get rid of the HDMI cable even inside of a Teams room. Well, how do I share content if I'm in a Teams room and I don't have an HDMI cable? Well, I join the platform and I share through the platform itself. That's a very common way, whether it's proximity join, whether it's a Teams casting, that is a very popular way that people are doing it. Same goes for direct guest join. If I join a Zoom meeting from direct guest join and I'm on a Teams room system, I can join the Zoom platform and share into the meeting itself. Again, these are the things that we can do. It's not the best scenario, like we said, and things like that, but there are trade-offs that we have. And I'll take another one that's on there. No ad hoc Teams meetings. This was Matt, when we were talking about it, I had to think to myself, you're right. I can't just dial somebody on Zoom and do a Zoom meeting from a Teams room. Vice versa, I can't go to a Zoom room and dial somebody directly on a Teams meeting. That's basically one of the things that you will see in many of these interop solutions. It has to be a scheduled meeting and it has to be there. That was something that, all right, I had to think about inside of my head. And when we're doing these slides, it's like, all right, how do we explain that to somebody? Because there are pitfalls that happen in these solutions. But again, if your main priority is your meeting platform, whether it's Teams, Zoom, WebEx, and everything else, and you're using that on there, direct guest join, the trade-offs actually become a little bit less of that what if.
Can we take
Exactly.
a couple more questions before we move into the technical piece of how this
Yep.
works? Because there's actually quite a few stuff. I'll pick out the direct guest join questions only, and then I'll keep the
because I
CVIs.
was gonna start complaining
later.
about how SIP and H323 weren't actually standards either, and we could go down the BFCP
I know, we
content
can get
not
crazy with
working
it.
in every platform route. That's what I was hoping to talk about.
We
Okay.
got a
I'll
lot of
start with
slides to
direct
get
guest
to,
joins,
guys, so.
and then when we get to CVI, I'll do CVI, and then afterwards you can rant about all the other stuff. Question in the Q&A on content sharing. If an MTR joins a Zoom meeting via direct guest join, can I see the content from the Zoom client? And can I share content via my MTR in the above experience? Yes or no?
So you can see content being shared into the Zoom meeting. So if someone remote is sharing content in that Zoom meeting, you're totally good. You cannot use the HDMI ingest on an MTR to share into a Zoom meeting over direct guest join. Same thing in reverse. If you've got a Zoom room joining a Teams meeting, HDMI ingest does not work. Instead, you'll have to join from the client on a laptop or mobile device and share.
Okay, good stuff. You want to do troubleshoot now or save it for later? So that's a question. Save for later. Okay.
We got a lot to go through. Yeah.
Yep, I know. Page standard. In an ideal production MTR device, let's say a Lenovo or Service Hub that already have direct guest join enabled, it's only a matter of forwarding the room. Yeah, that's right.
Yep.
Only single display, correct. Multi-display just doesn't exist. And
We're going to get through all that inside of the thing. So let's move on with the slides and we'll go through it.
Okay.
Yeah, we got feature comparison stuff.
Yep.
So this is just how direct guest join works from a more technical level. So we tried to genericize this so that it kind of fits any of the platform hardware. So whether you're receiving you're getting a Teams meeting invite at the end of the day, you as a business user in your organization, and then whatever hardware might be in that room, it could be a Zoom room, could be a Cisco codec, could be a Teams room. If you get an external meeting invite, that's Teams, you're going to forward that invite to the conference room account. Then the conference room is going to accept that invite, and then it's going to create that content. If it's a Teams room, it's going to use the Teams link there, and it's going to generate Teams details and a Teams join button on the console. If it's a Zoom room, it's going to generate a Teams join button on the console, assuming direct guest join's enabled. Same thing, Cisco codec, assuming you've got the WebRTC bits enabled on the Cisco codec, you're going to hit a join button and it's going to end up in the Teams meeting. And it will then, in this scenario here, we walked through being a Cisco or a Zoom room device. We're going to do that launch and it's going to make it into the Teams meeting at the end of the day by launching a Chromium web browser on the device.
Yeah. Let's go to the next thing because I think we jump right into the cloud. This is CVI side, and this is another. Remember, we had direct guest join and we had CVI as the two things. So CVI really stands for that Cloud Video Interop, and this is again meant for something that is your bridge to a Teams room if you're a Teams customer. Cloud Video Interop allows video, audio, screen sharing, some of those things and everything else. But we want you to get to a Teams room. Man, I think it's important that we stress that on all of these systems. We want you to get to the platform that you're using, that system, because we talk about it all the time. This is much more than just audio and video inside of rooms. We're doing things with AI. We're doing things with transcription. We're doing things with the platform to integrate all of these things together. But what don't we want to do? We don't want to exclude these endpoints that actually are inside of your system. We're giving you that bridge that allows you time to amortize these systems to get over the Teams room. So CVI is partner driven. We've got a couple of partners out there that do this, and it's really one of those solutions, Matt, like you said, for H323 and SIP. And we can get into, is it a standard? Is it not a standard? We can get into all of that. But this is really where we're looking for these sort of systems. And again, it allows systems that primarily are not Microsoft Teams systems into the Teams meeting.
Exactly. And no matter how many times we can quote the RFCs, there are standards and not standards for
Yes.
these things. We'll call it standards based for the sake of conversation. And CVI was, as you mentioned, intended to be that bridge into a Teams meeting. So an organization that's got 1,000 standards-based room systems in their environment can't transition those overnight. So if you're trying to join Teams meetings and your organization switches to Teams, and we saw this a lot during COVID, where the world changed overnight, but you can't change your offices overnight, and you can't change your conference room deployment overnight. So CVI is that light it up, go forth and conquer, and all of your rooms can join a Teams meeting. And this makes it really easy to get into your Teams meeting, have audio, video, content share. Now, to your point, Jimmy, it doesn't have all the better together pieces that we expect when you're joining as an authenticated participant in a meeting, and that we know where you are, and we know some of the proximity capabilities and some of the more advanced capabilities for Teams just don't exist on CVI. But as a transition tool, this is great. Or as an interop tool, if your majority of your organization is Zoom rooms today, and you just need to join Teams meetings using PECSIP's interop experience from a Zoom room into a Teams meeting, leverages our CVI capabilities today. It's, again, just a SIP dial into a Teams meeting. It works, it gets you into your meeting, and you have a positive experience in your meeting, and then you hang up and go back to 95% of your meetings being Zoom, and then you continue on. Again, this is intended to be that transitionary tool or a translation tool if you're an interop service.
Yeah, and if we go through the pros and cons and everything, we just sort of said it. And I think it's important, Matt, and one of the things that I've been out talking about in a lot of the conversations that I have with partners and customers is the thought of, if we all went away 5 years ago, and now we're going back to the office, none of us work the same way that we did 5 years ago. But we probably are going back to some of the conference room systems that have the technology of 5 and 10 years ago. And it just may not work for everybody coming in. So that's why we really see the bridge of where we want to get to and everything else. It's a great solution when you have SIP and H323. It's a great solution when partners can provide an array of solutions for, hey, let's bridge all of these different things together so that my what if now becomes, okay, I can handle that. But you do get trade-offs with CVI, Matt.
Yeah, no, I mean, there are absolutely trade-offs with CVI. There are things that you just can't do from a capabilities perspective.
Ad hoc meetings. Again, that was something that kept on coming up in the conversations that you and I had before. And when we had it, you were adamant. You were like, no ad hoc meeting. And I had to think about it for a second, because I'm like, wait, you're right. And you don't get these kind of experiences from a lot of people that are going to say, hey, CVI is better. Hey, direct as joined is better. You're not going to understand all of these behavior scenarios, which is why we wanted to have this conversation so that everybody can understand and know that there are pluses and minuses to everything here. But you have to understand them going in when you're having the conversation with a customer.
Oh, yeah, and absolutely. And like I've seen in the chat here a couple times, no PowerPoint Live is another good example of just content share, because guess what? There's no PowerPoint renderer on a CVI endpoint today. So how do you render PowerPoints? And then what do you even do? Like, even if we were able to render the PowerPoint slide, how do you get the videos over? Or how do you get some of the other content over? So there's just challenges there from a capability perspective of having to do that translation, or even taking it a step further and looking at some of the authenticated join capabilities where, there's no ad hoc join. So you can't just kick off a Teams meeting. Why? Because that endpoint isn't authenticated into Teams. So no matter what it is, there's no starting a Teams meeting from it. You can join a scheduled meeting, but you can't join a meeting and then go, oh, let me invite Jimmy, let me invite Michelle and drag them into this existing meeting. That just doesn't work today. Same thing, joining from your mobile device and having a companion
Let's take
experience.
it even for the biggest thing that you and I talk about, dual screen. There's an option now. If you are on a Zoom room and you want to join a Teams meeting and have people and content in the layout, that's an option that you can do with CVI. So again, pluses, minuses for everything. And I think if we go to the next slide, we're going to see a little bit about how actually CVI works. Now, this is something we talk about because the CVI actually comes in, connects to a bot, and that's how they get the people. That's how they get the layouts. Everything is labeled inside of this, allowing our CVI partners to actually display layouts that aren't available in Direct Guest Join.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, so at the end of the day, what Microsoft provides is what you see in that CVI box there, where we provide a Graph SDK that's available to CVI partners to adopt and attach and connect to Teams meetings over their own configuration. So I saw in the chat, is it only PECSIP? Nope, Cisco has a CVI offering as well. There used to be ones from BlueJeans and Poly. Those have slowly gone away over time. So now today, the reality is there's PECSIP and Cisco offering CVI capabilities into Teams. They both have pros and cons to them. Our public documentation has who's implemented what features are available from our SDK. So you may see some features available in PECSIP that aren't available in Cisco, and some things in Cisco that aren't available in PECSIP. I saw a comment about 3 screens somewhere in the chat there. Cisco implemented that. I don't believe PECSIP has. So there's some differences fundamentally in how the product works, but worth that conversation with both partners if you're exploring CVI of what makes more sense. But at the end of the day, they're leveraging a set of standardized capabilities we've made available. It's just whether they've implemented it or not.
Yeah, and if we go to the next slide, this is sort of where we want to show you a meeting invite that happens. Matt, we sort of threw this slide in because it was important to understand. We're pulling things from the body of the meeting. We're pulling things from the header of the meeting. We're looking, are you on a Teams room, and is it a Teams meeting? Well, if it's not, what else can we do? And I think that CVI-enabled invite sort of shows you that from the SIP side, we can provide that information, again, to other meeting types so that if Zoom has it, if you're on a Zoom room and we forward this, it knows that, hey, I can actually join this via the CVI coordinates. That's an important distinction to understand. Direct guest join does not have all of these options inside of it. It just has the URL of the meeting itself.
And I like this slide because as soon as we released this capability, Jimmy, you called me freaking out.
Yes.
And so I find this one funny. But all that we did here was we added a capability to where previously, and this is just like every other UC provider. So, you can pick on Microsoft all day, but this one was a scenario where prior to SIP guest join being released, the only way that your SIP video endpoint could join a Teams meeting was if it had that join with a video conference device set of details in it, which meant that whoever's meeting you were joining needed to have CVI enabled on their account. Now, this was the way to do it. This was what made sense. The reality was, though, this didn't work for some organizations. Say you're an organization that's got a bunch of CVI endpoints still deployed in your organization, and you're trying to join Teams meetings. Cool, easy. Any meeting scheduled by your organization will have that join with a video conference device set of details in it. But say you get an external meeting invite, or say you get a meeting invite from Microsoft now, as we've gotten rid of CVI from our environment because all of our rooms are now Teams rooms, all 13,000 and whatever of them. So say that room, you're trying, say you're getting an invite from Microsoft and trying to join. You couldn't join that meeting because our invites don't have CVI details anymore. So now your endpoint can't make it in, but you're paying for CVI. So does that really make sense? So what we made available is if you're paying for CVI today, your CVI partner can make it so you can join any Teams meeting, regardless of whether it has that join to the video conference device links in it. What this did is make all of your rooms a little bit more valuable so they can continue to join Teams meetings. It added more value for our CVI partners, but it didn't change anything. All we did was make it so that that edge case where there wasn't CVI on the invite, now you can still make it into that meeting if you're paying for CVI. This didn't make it so that now you don't need to go and do MTRs because there's still a bunch of other capabilities that don't exist on CVI. Right. It didn't change any of that. All it solved was a challenge where you didn't have that join to the video conference link in it.
Yeah. So, and the reason why, a lot of people want to understand this is because there might be people that say, hey, this is good enough and everything else. But again, getting to that MTR is where we want you to do things because there are capabilities that don't exist here. So if we go to the next slide, Michelle, we'll start talking a little bit about the customer scenario and where you are subscribed to CVI and where you're not subscribed to CVI. And again, we want to talk to the customer and say, how many of these what ifs are we actually having? How many meeting types are we not getting into? And then give them the solution. Matt, you said it. We enabled that SIP join just for the fact that our customers were not getting into meetings. And it was something that was challenging for them from another room that they had that they couldn't get to MTR right away, but they needed a solution so they could get into it.
Exactly. So, I mean, this is, and there's a bunch of questions in the chat here and comments in the chat. So both PECSIP and Cisco have implemented this. The entire intent is to make this less of a concern for your end users. So if your end users are trying to join a Teams meeting and you've got rooms that are still CVI rooms, they can just forward that Teams meeting invite to that room. They don't have to think, oh, does this have the video conference details in it? Or what do I do if it doesn't? How do I join? We wanted to make it so that there weren't failure scenarios. What we always want is for your end users to make it into the Teams meeting. So be it a WebRTC experience, be it a CVI experience, be it an MTR experience, minimally audio, video, content. You need to be able to get in and have a productive meeting. Your end users shouldn't need to think about, oh, does this have SIP details in it? Like, we all know what we're talking about when we say that, but
Correct.
Bob in accounting, and I always pick on Bob in accounting for some reason, I don't know why, poor Bob, but Bob in accounting doesn't know what SIP is and doesn't know to think about that. He just wants to get in, walk into his conference room and join his meeting and have whatever conversation he needs to have and then continue on with his day. He doesn't want to think about this. So if he gets an invite from another third party, maybe there's an auditing firm and Bob's going through an audit, and the last thing Bob wants to deal with is not being able to get into the meeting to begin with. Bob just wants to be able to forward the invite, click join, and be in his call. That's what matters here, regardless of which solution is being used. So the SIP guest join enabled that for CVI invites.
Okay, so both of you talked about CVI, you talked about direct guest join. Talk a little bit about the trade-offs of interrupt in the meeting room experience.
Sure.
Yeah, we've said it, Matt.
Yeah.
It's the minimum experience: audio, video, and a little bit of content sharing. Think about even the simple part that we have here. Everybody's able to chat with us, get these questions in and everything else. So we're going to get to all those questions that are coming in chat and things like that. But there's no live reactions. I'm watching people heart. I'm watching people do thumbs up. I'm watching people give us that. These are and of course, everybody goes into it. But that's the idea. Even the lobby control. Matt, this was something that we added last night to this slide because we thought about it and we said, yeah, we can't even do lobby control. When you're on these other platforms, it's just getting into those Teams meetings.
Exactly. Yeah. And at the end of the day, regardless of what platform it is, it's getting into your meeting, having a productive meeting, and making sure you're successful in whatever that call needs to be. And then there are scenarios, though, that you as the IT admin or you as the partner helping a customer on this need to be able to understand, so that as you have those conversations and understand the business need from the customer, if the customer comes to you and goes, hey, dual screen is the most important thing in the world for me, well, then you need to consider what scenarios include dual screen. Or, hey, interactive whiteboarding is the most important thing I could possibly do in all of my rooms. And I do have customers that way. You walk in the room and I need to be able to interact. Awesome. Walk in. Then you got to build rooms in a certain fashion to be able to support that. And so this is more of an education scenario of, again, what is the right Teams meeting experience for your rooms? What are you striving towards? What's the end goal from the business perspective? Ignore some of the technical bits for a minute and just understand the business pieces of it and what your end users are expecting here.
Yeah, even look at number 7 that's on this list, calling. A simple thing like, hey, I need to be able to call out of this room and things like that. Sometimes those are the kind of things that we have to think about. What am I able to actually do inside of these rooms? And number 5, which is the device management of it. We understand, again, we want one management platform for everything. And we do that with the Teams Room Pro system and some of the devices inside of TAC. But we're looking at it and saying, hey, we don't want everything to be all over the place. That's a challenge for management systems or managers that are doing conference room systems. You know, we talked about the challenge of Bob getting into the room. Well, the same thing happens with the IT staff if we've got to look at multiple things. What firmware are we on these devices? Well, now that's a different platform than this device and so on and so forth, which is why we want you to say, if Teams is your primary platform, we want you in a Teams room. But understanding all of this is just why we're almost 37 minutes into this, Matt, and we still haven't even gotten.
We haven't even talked about Teams rooms.
I know. We haven't even gotten to the chart of everything that's in there. So let's go to the next slide, because I think what we're going to do is we're going to go through some of these. And again, these charts, you know, if you look at the Learn article, Matt, that you published just even a couple of days ago. We started with the charts again, and the charts are because here's the features that you can expect from a Microsoft Teams room, from a CVI-enabled solution, and a direct guest join solution.
Exactly. And, we can walk through this pretty quickly because we don't have to spend a ton of time reading slides to folks, but just important to call out different capabilities and different experiences and different expectations. Now, this is geared towards, and what you see here is Teams rooms joining each of these scenarios. So a native Teams room doing this capability, what does CVI leverage to do this? And what does Direct Guest Join make available to do each of these different scenarios here on a Teams rooms device? And Michelle, you can flip to the next slide too, and we'll blow through these pretty quickly. But what do you get from a content share experience? What do you get from a video quality experience? If 1080p 30 fps is the top priority for you, you're going to really want to look at a native room experience or that SIP based join experience over CVI, regardless of what direction you're going. If you've got all Teams rooms deployed today, but there's a 5-10% use case where you're joining Zoom today, you're going to want to look at that cross-platform SIP capability we just released for Teams rooms devices so that you're joining with dual screen. You're getting 1080p 30 fps because, again, just from a content share perspective, if that's the top priority for your organization, then there's a direction that you need to go. But the goal is that this helps make those decisions for the business users, and again, driving towards the end user experience in those rooms.
Before we move to the next one, there's people asking, I hope you shared the presentation. All credit to Matt and Jimmy for putting this stuff together. This is not official Microsoft slideware. As a matter of fact, some of the Learn articles are being written based on the great stuff that Matt and Jimmy are doing for these sessions. So it's difficult for us to share. We will check with our legal teams to see if it's possible. Otherwise, I'm afraid it's just taking screenshots and YouTubing it after this session, or going to the learning path that's available to all partners.
Yeah, and then PowerPoint Live, wireless content sharing, layout controls exist across all of them. Different layouts, perhaps, but layout controls exist across all of them. We hinted at, and you can go to the next one too. We can keep rolling. I'll hit these quickly unless, Jimmy, there's something specific you want to chat on. But whiteboard and content sharing, doing whiteboard cameras, having the interactive touchscreen, or doing coordinated meeting join. Those capabilities are all things that you would expect from a native Teams room. You're not going to get those from an Interop experience. You're not going to be able to launch a Microsoft whiteboard. And, SIP didn't have a capability to do digital whiteboarding back and forth, the last I checked at least. So, some of those capabilities that you expect to see across different platforms are just going to come from a native experience. Same thing as you add some of the AI capabilities in, multiple video streams coming from a device, doing facial recognition from a device, shipping closed captioning over, or doing intelligent speaker identification. A lot of that all comes down to having a native endpoint in those meetings. That's not to say that if those aren't needs, then cool. But again, having some of that conversation. And then as you go to device management becomes a bit more challenging. So this one is very Microsoft centric, of like Microsoft manageability of these devices today. For Microsoft, we manage Teams rooms devices. If you've got CVI endpoints today, you might have a third-party manageability platform that can manage those endpoints and do some of the things that are mentioned here. But we don't offer any of that from a Microsoft perspective today. And same thing for Direct Guest Join. The Teams Rooms Pro Management world doesn't manage Zoom rooms, for instance. That's just not a capability that we have today, nor is it something that I'm aware of that we're exploring. So again, from a manageability perspective, there may be third-party platforms that can do some of these things, but from a Microsoft-centric perspective, if you're trying to manage stuff joining into Teams meetings, we don't have manageability capabilities for third-party platforms.
Yeah, and I think if you look at it, you're going to see a lot of supported on the Teams room side for all of these things. And the reason we're not saying Teams rooms is the way that you have to do this. What we're trying to do is show you why Teams room is the way that we would prefer, if you're a Teams customer, to actually have it. But CVI and Direct Guest Join are a very important conversation to have with your customers. Like we said, if you've got this boardroom and you've got dual screens, and dual screen is an important part of that boardroom experience, CVI may be something that you want, whether it's a Zoom room, whether it's a Teams room, whether it's something else, so that you can take advantage of that second screen. I saw in the comments, it was, well, what's shown on the second screen if I do Direct Guest Join? It's actually a black screen. It's not used. That's the Direct Guest Join experience because, and this is part of it, engineering a browser to show on two screens is a challenge. And it's not something that can be done across a platform, and a platform doesn't know when you're using two screens. So there's all of these challenges that need to be invented for this. And we made these charts for a specific reason. just to sort of call out and point out some of the things that we get asked as Microsoft about the different solutions that we've engineered. All of these solutions provide something that a customer has come to us and had a challenge with. And that's what we really wanted to point out with all these charts, Matt, and what we put on the Learn articles as well.
Exactly. And then one last piece that we wanted to hit on before we roll through Q&A is this is now Teams rooms joining third-party meetings. So a lot of what we've talked about today is all about getting into a Teams meeting. So I'm an end user and I want to join a Teams meeting. And what's the right platform that my IT admin should have picked for me to have a positive experience in a Teams meeting? Now, what this slide is I just want to hit on this because it's relevant to this conversation, but in the opposite direction. And so I'm trying to be crisp in how we communicate this one because I don't want to conflate it with everything else we've talked about here today. But we have now released for Teams rooms on Windows devices that have SIP dialing enabled. You can actually join what we're calling any third-party meeting. But the reality is you see the list here, and then other platforms just launches a SIP URI, and you can type in the SIP URI. So it can literally be anything so long as it's got SIP. But you can do join by ID and join buttons for Zoom, WebEx, GoToMeeting, Google Meet, Amazon Chime, and Ring Central meetings, all from a Teams Rooms device, assuming you have SIP dialing enabled on it. So you have to have SIP dialing enabled on that device, which will require you to contract with a CVI partner who has SIP dialing. Today, that is PECSIP. You can chat with your other CVI partners to see if there's an opportunity there. This is live today. It is on the roadmap for Teams Rooms on Android devices. No exact ETA there to share, but more to come in that space. But this is a enhanced interop solution in the opposite direction if you've got a Teams room deployed.
And we thought it was important to share. Actually, we put this slide together last night, believe it or not. Matt was able to actually log into his portal and grab the screenshot and put it on there. We thought it was important to sort of show everybody where this is, because again, we're doing this based upon customer issues that have been arisen, customer challenges that have been arisen, and doing all of this enables us to have that conversation of a Teams room system, CVI, and direct guest join. None of these sort of provide you, hey, definitely do this. All of these are in a conversation with your customer about what's best for them.
Yeah, we try to keep these sessions under 45 minutes, and we always fail. So for those that need to drop now, there will be no
recording.
Yeah, and exactly. So we'll get the Q&A. We're definitely not done, but just know that if you want to watch the session again, it's going to be available on both the Partner Learning Path and on the Teams Rooms Tech Talk YouTube channel. YouTube right after this, and then a Learning Path somewhere next week, hopefully. Also, there will be no session in December because that's when we're going to do the Teams Rooms, or actually the Converge Comms bootcamp. If you haven't signed up for the bootcamp, there's a pinned conversation with a link from Jimmy where you can sign up to the bootcamp. Make sure you do not miss it. And then also, if you haven't done so yet, make sure you sign up for Ignite. I think in person is sold out, but there's still more than enough room. I don't want to talk about it, Matt, but there's still more than enough room available online as well. So and there's going to be a lot on Teams Rooms that's going to be announced next week. You want to dive into questions, guys?
Sure.
Yeah.
Did you see anything that came up?
Questions. Yeah. All the questions are when and where can they find Jimmy and I at Ignite? That's not every.
I'm sorry. You're breaking up, Matt. I'm sorry.
One of the questions that did come up about PowerPoint Live, Matt, and Cisco offers PowerPoint Live. There are CVI providers that are starting to do PowerPoint Live, but it's important to understand this isn't PowerPoint Live. This is a screenshot of a PowerPoint presentation.
It hasn't been released yet, Jimmy.
Yes, but this is. But we can talk about it, right?
No.
Too late now. It's on YouTube now.
Too late now.
See, that's why I love Jimmy. That's why
we don't tell Jimmy things.
Yeah.
This is why we don't tell Jimmy anything.
What are the other questions that are in there?
So besides that one, There's been lots of questions around kind of the SIP dialing capability from MTR into Teams meetings, or out from Teams rooms into third-party meetings. That capability requires SIP capability and SIP dial strings on that third-party invite. So Zoom CRC needs to be enabled, for instance, things like that. So things you need to watch for there. That capability is available for Teams rooms on Windows today. Teams rooms on Android is a roadmap item, but we will get there, I promise. It is on the to-do list there. Outside of that,
there's a new nickname. Jimmy Loose Lips Vaughn, and it's in the chat.
So we don't tell Jimmy about new features before they come out.
Let me see
there were some asks around Google Meet plus WebRTC and Direct Guest Join. We continue to work with Google on that one. No exact ETA to be announced there, but one of the reasons we shipped the SIP dialing capability was just to go faster from an interop perspective. We know that there's some challenges because folks need to have CVI capabilities and things like that, but we wanted to make it available to solve those needs without having to wait for your UC partners of choice to work together and build those bridging solutions. We wanted to get something quick to market. That's the quick to market answer there.
There's a question on web traffic. While the majority of our call utilize Teams, there's a small percentage that requires us to quickly adapt for Zoom functionality. Regarding Zoom Direct Guest Join feature on Microsoft Teams Rooms, I presume we need to configure the standard web traffic, including IP, URLs, and ports. Could you recommend a Zoom URL allow IP list for us to approve our firewalls? Is that a Zoom question, Matt, or is it a Microsoft question?
That is a Zoom question. So you will want to chat with Zoom. The reality is it is their web endpoints that you need to be most conscious of. But Zoom has public documentation on what you need to be able to join their web experiences. And I would just reference that. Same thing in the opposite direction for Teams. That capability is there. And it looks like Jimmy maybe didn't actually leak the PowerPoint Live thing because it is now on the public roadmap. It was not on the public roadmap the last time I looked at it.
I posted it.
I didn't write it. So, all right. So, Jimmy, for PowerPoint Live in CVI, we will be releasing the ability to show a static image of the PowerPoint slide. So, videos won't work, animations don't work, things like that don't work, but you will get a static image of the PowerPoint slide available. We've made and we're making that capability available to your CVI partners. You will want to chat with your CVI partner of choice to see when they will have that implemented on their side.
I think we got most questions. A lot of comments on Bob.
I think so.
Poor Bob. Claps. Jimmy.
What Ignite sessions to look out for? There's one from our friend Ilya. Ilya's got an awesome Ignite session. I would watch that one. Nicole Hertzkowitz also has a keynote that I would watch. Those are probably the two top ones. If you happen to be at Ignite, we have a booth with a Teams room in it. Some of the gear behind me may or may not be physically being installed in that Teams room. But you're welcome to come say hi and come see everybody.
I think based on the announcement list that I saw, these are the ones that are a must join for me. I think this will cover most of the stuff that's important to the folks on this call.
But I hope the top two, those are good. At least I got the top two right.
Yeah.
I hope that everybody attending here learned something today, not only about the Teams Room, CVI, and Direct Guest Join, but also appreciated everything that we did here. Again, we're a big community. We've got a lot of people that we speak to, that we talk to, and everything else. If you see us, out at Ignite, if you see us at events and things like that, always come up and say hi. If you've got questions about CVI and other things, ask us. The way that we produce a lot of the content that we have is through the questions that we get from the partner community, from the customer community, and everything else. We need to know what the challenges are. We need to know what to train. Matt, one of the questions that we actually had internally here from a very large group of people that we engage with was they wanted to see actually autopilot, which is something that we're thinking about for January. But if there's a topic that's specific that everybody wants to do, make sure that we know about it. Make sure that we understand what it is, because what we think is it's probably not in a Learn article if you're asking the question about it. Now, there are times, Matt, where we go to the deployment playbook, and there's times where Matt goes to the deployment playbook and says, Jimmy, look at this, and he sends me the screenshot of it. So it's impossible to know everything, and it's impossible to understand everything, but we do want that feedback so that we can do stuff like this.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks so much for joining. Matt, Jimmy, thank you. There's a lot of preparation that goes into this. So kudos to you once again. We're looking forward to seeing you all at the bootcamp in December. I know some of you are looking forward to seeing Matt and Jimmy in Chicago. I'll be watching online, unfortunately. And then we'll announce new learning hours for January. The calendar will automatically be updated, so nothing you have to do for that. It's just the topic that we're going to be announcing later. Thanks, everyone, for watching. Have a great rest of your day, and we'll see you again soon.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye, everybody.